in the diagnostic process, every child is looked at differently based on their behavior, their personality and everything, because something that may be a challenge for one child may not be a challenge for the other child. So it's really important to consider each child as an individual and kind of see them in different ways and see what the different issues are. For us, we were concerned with Dovey because his development hadn't been on track like it was with Avadia. Avadia was behind, and once we found out that Avadia was behind, and once we got the diagnosis for Avadia, we really said, okay, now we need to look at Dovey. What's going on with Dovey, because we knew already that his speech was also delayed, so we thought, okay, his older brother's not speaking well, so since he's the younger sibling, that's probably why he's not speaking as well as he should be for his age. So at the beginning, we didn't really think too much of it. We always knew that Dovey was hyperactive, just because he'd always been on the go from in the womb to when he was first born and so forth. He's always had a lot of issues with regulation. He's always had a lot of trouble with regulation. He's either too hyper or really calm. He doesn't really know how to find that place in between. It's always been a real struggle. As a child, I would say, as a small child, like as a baby, he was a lot more difficult than Avadia, but that's partly to do with personality. Avadia is very calm and laid back, and in his issues, he tends to shut down and become very quiet, and Dovey's the opposite. He gets really excited, he gets overexcited, he's jumping off chairs, he's jumping off sofas, he's climbing furniture, he's all over the place. And as a toddler, not like between toddler and baby, he was very difficult because he was always climbing and crawling and into everything, and he had no fear factor. He would jump off furniture, he would run into stuff. We couldn't take him out because I didn't know what he might try. Like you literally had to be with him 100% of the time, watching what he was doing and like predicting what he might do, because you didn't know what he would do. It was just all over the place, and it was very stressful, and it was really difficult to take him out as a small child. It's still difficult sometimes. Now that he's gotten a little bit older and we figured out some techniques and things, it's become much easier to deal with him when we need to go out. But initially it was very, very difficult before we really knew what was going on and what we could do. I was worried about his safety a lot. I didn't feel that I could take both children out and keep Dovey out of trouble, which is pretty scary. As a parent, you want to know that you can keep your child safe and also be able to go out and do the errands that you need to do and not be stressed. It was very stressful just to even try to go grocery shopping with him or go to the mall and get clothes for them. It was very difficult to take them with me and do those things, so a lot of times I would stay home and just take care of them because it was too difficult to go with them. And when I could sneak like 30 minutes or an hour, I'd just run out and do the things that I needed to do because it was too difficult to take them along. Back to the diagnosis. So Dovey's diagnosis started when he was 2.5. When Dovey started preschool, that's when we realized that there were social issues and that he had no interest in his peers. With Avadia, there was always some interest. He just didn't know how to interact with them. But with Dovey, there really was no interest at all. Like, he really, really just didn't care about his peers. He didn't want to play with them. He didn't want to look at them. He didn't want to talk to them. He didn't want to do anything. He just wanted to do whatever he was doing, and that was it. So as the school year went on, that became more apparent to the teacher, and she tried to approach us about those things. But like I said before, I really wasn't in a place to hear it, unfortunately, at that time. So it took me probably about 6 months before we really, maybe not 6 months, about 4 months before I really did anything with her suggestions, because I was just still trying to digest a lot of things. So basically, once my husband and me spoke about getting Dovey diagnosed, and we decided in the end that we were going to take him and do the same steps that we did with Avadia. And my husband said to me, look, let's just do this, let's get it done, and then we know we've covered our bases. We know we did what we needed to do as parents, and we haven't like pushed something under the rug because we didn't want to deal with it. So we decided to have him evaluated, and we went through the whole process like we did with Avadia. We filled out the paperwork, the teacher filled out the paperwork, we submitted it, we met with the social worker, we made the appointments to go for the diagnostic meeting with the speech therapist, occupational therapist, psychologist, developmental doctor, and physical therapist. Physical therapist, speech therapist, occupational therapist, psychologist, and developmental doctor. So we went to the diagnostic meeting, which they did the same with Avadia. They played with him a bit. They asked us some questions. They did the DSM-5 things with him. And they basically came to the conclusion at the first meeting that they felt like he had severe ADHD. At that time, he was around, 3. We were like, okay, ADHD, that's not too bad, But they did want him to start speech therapy, and I'm trying to think if he had to do occupational therapy. I think they just had him do speech therapy initially because his speech was pretty far behind, and they thought that could also be just because of Avadia. So initially everyone was kind of on the same page of this is ADHD, and he's just a little bit behind speech-wise. So we started him with speech therapy, and he continued in his GON, but he really struggled that year. And as the year went on, it became apparent to all of us that something else was going on, but we just didn't know what. So we had our follow-up meeting with the developmental team, and they reassessed him because at that point they didn't want to diagnose him with ADHD. They just said, look, we're pretty sure he has it, but because of his age, we're not going to diagnose him with it yet. We just want to kind of wait and see. So he pretty much had the diagnosis, but it was just, he was really too young to do anything with it. So at that point they suggested that he be put into a GON for children that have learning disabilities, just mild learning disabilities of some sort. At that point they were suggesting to us that maybe Dovey just had a lower cognitive ability than other children, and that there was ADHD, and they weren't sure what the cognitive issue could be. They didn't feel like it was autism at that point, so they recommended that we put him into a special GON, get him into the special ed system here, and put him into a special GON for kids with low cognitive ability. And so that's what we did for the following year, because we could see already that Dovey wasn't going to cope in a regular GON, and we didn't want to put him through the trauma that Avadia had by going into a regular GON. So, into a regular preschool. So it was the end of the year. They had already had the meetings for the committee for special ed, and we were very lucky because at that time we had the appointment to get Avadia into special ed as well. So we were able to get in on the coattails of Avadia and get both the boys into the special education system for the following year. Really excited for the boys and where everything was leading up to. So as a parent, we felt like, wow, we're doing really good. We're managing this, So basically he started school, and like I said, he really seemed kind of down. He didn't seem so excited to go to school, and at first I didn't think too much of it because he never really did well in new situations. So I thought initially this is just because it's something different. He's not used to it. It's just normal growing pains of I'm not sure about where I am. But as time went on and we saw that he did seem to get to a point where he was happy to be there, but he never seemed like he was really, he just didn't seem himself quite when he was there. So I knew that that something wasn't right and that maybe he needed more. At that point, we also started to realize some of the behavior issues that he was having. We really felt like I had started to read more about autism just because of Avadia and borrow books from our local library. And from that, I kind of realized, I was like, hey, like, I got this sensory book and I started to read a lot of it, and I was like, this is so Adobe. And basically from that, I started realizing they had a lot of sensory issues. And then I saw this other book, and it was about how sensory issues, because you can have a sensory disorder, you can have ADHD, and you can have autism. And it was basically like on a, I'm trying to think of what you call it, it's the circle graph charts, where then you have like an overlapping circle, and it's basically like these three things all overlap, and you could have two of them, you could have one of them, you could have all three of them, but basically the criteria for diagnosing them are all pretty much more or less the same. Like, they're worded differently, but the criteria is pretty similar. And this book kind of was discussing the theory of like, or children that have ADHD misdiagnosed and maybe they have autism, or some of them maybe getting diagnosed with autism and have ADHD. And it was a really interesting book, and at that point, that's when I kind of started to say, hey, Dobie has these issues and he's hyperactive, but if you're hyperactive, you want to play with your peers. You might just be hyper, you want to play outside, you want to play ball, but you get really excited, but you don't not want to play with them. And Dobie still didn't want to play with anybody. He wanted to play by himself, doing whatever he wanted in a corner, didn't want to share, didn't want to let anyone into his space. And that's when I really started to see like some of the issues that I felt were significant for him. And when we had our follow-up with the developmental team, we started to discuss this, and the psychologist basically flat out told us, no, he's not autistic, and I will not diagnose him as autistic. She said, he plays with me, he looks at me, and I'm like, yeah, he plays and he looks at adults, but he doesn't play and he doesn't look at his peers. He's not even interested in them. We even had his teacher come with us, and she talked to them, but they just didn't. The developmental doctor was kind of on the fence about what was going on with Dobie. He knew there was something more than ADHD. He just wasn't sure if it was autism or something else. I think he was considering at that point more low cognitive issues. And the psychologist basically was like, no, he's not on the autism spectrum. I don't see that. So at that point, the developmental doctor referred us to a doctor that works here in Jerusalem, and she is like the head of the pediatric, she's a pediatric psychiatrist, and she's head of that department at the hospital. And he referred us to her because he had spoken to her about Dobie, and he really just felt lost in what was going on. So we set up to meet with her. She sent us a bunch of paperwork that we had to fill out regarding his history and a questionnaire. So we did all of the paperwork, and we sent it back, and we got the appointment, and it was, I think it was the summer, I remember it was summertime. It was at the end of the school year of him being in this special preschool. So at the end of that year, basically in the summer, we were trying to push to get this diagnosis, because by that point, we really felt like he could excel if he got to go to the school that Avadia was going to, because Avadia was really thriving and turned like a huge corner developmentally, and we just felt like Dobie could grow so much if he had access to all the help that Avadia's getting. And at that point, we really felt like he had issues, the same issues as Avadia, just in different ways. So we pushed for that. We really fought for him to get evaluated properly and someone to like consider other options. Basically, we said we don't know that it is autism, but we know something's wrong, that something's wrong with our child, basically. And we went with our gut and said, we're gonna fight for this until we get an answer that's gonna give him help. So basically, when we went to this doctor, our youngest, which is our daughter, Haleli, came with us to the appointment, and it wound up being a really good thing, because she saw, even with his own sister, he basically ignored her, and she would try to play with him, and he would just kind of be like, what are you doing? Like, don't, like, just kind of turn away from her and take the toy away when she was trying to play with him, and she could just see like from that interaction how he just wasn't socially interested in anyone, as well as speaking to Dr. Paz and all the information she got from her and from him and all the information she got from us. She really came to the conclusion that yeah, he is on the spectrum, and I really think it would benefit him. She felt like 80% sure that he was on the spectrum. She didn't feel like he was necessarily 100%, but she said she felt strongly enough that she was willing to give us the signature for the diagnosis that that he was, because she felt like it would really benefit him to get the help, and she really felt like more or less he was there. So because all the issues that he was still having after we had discussed the ADHD stuff was basically came down to social, of like he had no social desires. So she pretty much was like, it is this, it can't, what else could it be? At that point we needed a second signature, and we had about a month till school started. Because he was already in the special education system, we didn't have to go through a committee meeting. We just needed to get the paperwork and get it submitted to the education board in order to get him into the school that we wanted. So we contacted Sulam and told them, look, we have one signature, we're trying to get the second signature. Do you think you could hold a spot for him or help us, you know, with any of this? And basically they agreed to hold a spot for him and help us like with the education board of getting everything submitted, and they really helped us through the process. And honestly, without them, I don't know if we could have got it all done in time for him to start school. At that point they were trying to place him for the next year, and the city had placed him in another GON, like the GON he'd been in, and I was supposed to go for the parent-teacher meeting. And so I went to meet that teacher, and she was basically like, look, just keep doing what you're doing. There's no point in us meeting because you're trying to get him into this other school, and if he's getting into that other school, like, he shouldn't start here and be here for a week or two and then move schools. That's just too exhausting for him. And so basically at that point we decided, and she let the school committee know as well, that he was basically going to not start school on time, and basically with the hopes that he's going to get into this other school. So we really were trying to figure out how we're going to get this other signature, and we went to a psychologist that me and my husband were seeing at the time, just for like stress related issues due to the children and all the issues that they were having. It took a toll on us, and I was having a lot of anxiety and stress issues, so I was speaking with someone just to get help for myself to cope with everything. And basically he wrote a letter for us saying that we're working on getting the second signature, which held a place for Dobie at the school that Avadia was at, and allowed us to get the paperwork that we needed, basically, because we had an appointment with the developmental team that we originally started with, and we were just waiting on that because they had gotten us a different psychologist within the department to take a look at Dobie to hopefully give us this second signature. So we went to meet with her, and she met with him, and she did the DSM-5 test with him, and she said that he was on the spectrum. And so in the end we got both signatures, and we were really feeling quite relieved at the time, but we were so stressed just because we're like, oh my gosh, is he gonna make it into school? What are we gonna do with him? And thank God, because of the amazing school that the boys go to now, he was able to get in. He started, I think, a week, 2 weeks late, which we were like, in the scheme of things is not the end of the world. But he got in, and now he is at the school that Vudge is in, and he has his diagnosis, and we are really happy. But it really was a huge struggle with a lot of bumps in the road, and I know that this is kind of like a hindsight video on the process that happened with him, but at the time it really didn't go so smoothly, and we really were like questioning ourselves and if we were trying to push a diagnosis on him, but we felt like in the end we weren't. And now that we look back and we see where he is, it's really sad, because we feel like God forbid we didn't listen to our gut and we didn't push for the things that we pushed for him. We don't know where he would be. He's really truly turned the corner this year, and it's really sad to think where he would be, and if we hadn't have done the things that we did. So we're really happy with where he is, and I can only say, like, if you're watching this video and you're in a similar situation, that you're the parent, you know your child best, and you know when something's right and you know when something's wrong, and no matter what any doctor tells you, at the end of the day you know your child best, and you really have to fight for the things that you think are going to help your child develop and get where they need to in life. And that's one thing I feel like I've learned really well through getting both our children diagnosed, is you really have to be an advocate for your child, because if you're not an advocate, no one else is going to be. Like, you're their support team, and if you're not there to support them, no one else is going to push for it. They might come in and they might help you for a bit, but really at the end of the day, it's down to you and what you can do and what you're willing to do and what you're able to do. And you know, there's always financial constraints and time constraints and balancing balancing a job and balancing children. It can be really difficult. During this whole process with Dovey, I was working full time, and I was lucky at the time of that, when we were having to run children to therapy to get him diagnosed and taking him to diagnosis appointments, I had a really flexible job, and that I could do it at any hour of the day, but I had to get 8 hours in, and that really helped me in being able to take care of their needs. And that's one thing I would say is, if you need to work and you have children that have special needs and need more care and need more attention and have more appointments, that if you can find something flexible or part-time, if that's an option for you, I think it really allows you to get them the help that they need and really be there for them when they need. And it's really important, at least initially, just to get them set up and into an infrastructure and get something in place for them. I really think it helps a lot. But anyways, if you guys have any questions or comments, please let me know. Don't forget to like my video and subscribe. And I'm happy to let you guys know about any other things. If you have any other questions about autism or videos you want to see, just let me know. Don't forget to comment. And have a great day. Bye.